Hi everyone, and welcome to another RavenDB webinar. With me today is Justin Adler, all the way from Down Under, and here we're going to talk about banking scenarios. This is actually a pop quiz for me because I have no idea what we're actually going to talk about. Justin suggested we do a webinar yesterday, and that's what we're actually doing. So, Justin, who are you and what are we going to talk about today?
Hi everyone. Yes, I'm just a RavenDB developer down here in Melbourne, and I've been using Jabber, the website, and there's a whole bunch of people on there who also hang out. And a question was raised by a folk there, a guy called Ronnie Overby, and it was an interesting question. And he said that he wanted to make sure that he's trying to use RavenDB, and he wanted to say that if he was making a credit card purchase, that the purchase would work. So that means he was implying that we have a banking scenario and he wants to charge his credit card, and let's say he wants to buy some shopping and it's $100. He wants to make sure that the bank site, which is running RavenDB, for example, can say, all right, let's have a look at his account, and his account has X number of dollars. Is that a successful or a bad transaction? And that's where we started talking, and that's when I thought, all right, let's go and ask Ayende himself and see what he thinks.
Okay, so this is actually an interesting question because there are two separate sides to the discussion. The first question, is actually this isn't how banks actually work. The bank, for example, if you log into your bank web management thingy, and you look at that and they tell you the numbers that you see in your account are not actually accurate. They're only accurate to the last business day, and even so we reserve the right to change them at any point in time, which is kind of annoying but perfectly understandable when you start thinking about how this actually works. And banks are actually been using that for a very long time because they've always been distributed. They always had to deal with multiple branches and the notion of, oh, we have a guy that can go into our branch in this street and withdraw some money, and then he goes to the branch on the other street and withdraws some more money. And there is absolutely no way that we can actually synchronize between these two banks fast enough. So,
okay, quick question. Does this mean that banks have to use like nightly jobs or processing? And number two, are the banks sort of constrained by older software, meaning that maybe more modern things such as Raven might be able to alleviate some of these or fix it up or come a bit closer to more real time?
Banks do a lot of stuff on a nightly basis, mostly because this is unrelated to that. Mostly because the major business rule in banking is that everything is actually calculated on a business day boundary. So let's say that we have the following sequence of events. I deposit $5, I withdraw $15, I deposit $20. Now, according to most banks, at the end of the day, it doesn't actually matter what order this transaction happened. So you wouldn't get overdraft fee, you wouldn't get any of those things, because that happened at the close of business day. Again, this is for historical reason, but now this is how banks operate. It's certainly the case that in many cases today you can get more real-time information. But because of these issues, because you have a lot of things that happen on batch scenarios, for example, transfer from other banks, other branches, other banks that uses different systems and those sort of things, then you still have these close of business days issues as well. So that's one part of that. The second part of that, the second part is that nevertheless there is still the need and the desire to actually want to see, to be able to do real-time operation with absolutely up to the millisecond information about what you're doing. The way that I usually model, now this isn't actually for, this isn't actually valid for credit card scenarios, because credit cards, you know what, let's do the credit card scenario, okay? Credit card scenarios don't actually hit the bank account on a regular basis. What they actually hit is your credit card limit at the credit card company machines. Okay, so far? So
Yep.
let's say that you have limit of 5,000 USD per month. Okay, the actual scenarios is more complicated than that, because then you also have this is more like it. And yes, it sucks. Okay, so the overall credit card limit that they tell you is $5,000. But then you have an additional limit. 1 second. So make sure that you have additional, so it's per week, per day, per transaction, those sort of things. Some of them are there to protect you. A lot of them are there to actually protect the credit company if in case someone steals your card. Now, this is something. So this is a very easy rule to enforce. No transaction can be over 500 USD. Now, what about this rule? That in a single day you may not do a transaction over 1,000 USD. And what about the rule for week or for month? So this really depends on the sort of scenario that you actually have in mind. So let's talk for a second about this exact thing. I'm going to say that you have credit card. So this is the document ID. And now you have things like a daily, and this is now a so what I'm actually doing here, okay, so notice what I'm doing here. Right here, I'm saying I actually need this to be up to the millisecond accurate. So I'm going to take additional.
Are those the amount?
Yeah, go ahead.
Are those the amount remaining for that
It can be the amount
that
of
true?
yeah, that's business logic related.
Okay, sorry. All right.
I would actually say this is the amount that was charged so far,
Incurred. Great, cool.
and then you have, you know, a thousand daily, monthly is 5,000, and weekly
Yep.
is
And the
something like
consumer
that.
could figure out the difference. Great. Yep.
Yes, and
Yep.
the basic idea is that at this point, every time that I have a new transaction, I'm actually going to go here and say, okay, what is the latest? Is this for this date? And if so, I'm adding that. And for this week, I'm adding that. For this month, adding that. What I will probably actually have is each of those would be an array of the last, you know, couple of months, last 2 weeks, last 7 days, those sort of things. The reason for that is that you also have offline transactions. So I may be able to actually give you something like, oh, here is a credit card slip that was done the old way, where they punch the card to the machine and it just give you a piece of paper and there is no online
Ah, yeah.
processing at all.
Yep.
So you can do those sort of things. And when you store all of that in a document, this is guaranteed to be up to the millisecond accurate. So this is one way of doing that. The annoying part about that is that you have to actually maintain this yourself. And this is all well and good. And now the question becomes, do I actually need to know this? Is it actually important for me to be up to the millisecond with this regard? And the answer is that for the most part, up to the millisecond is not really important, even when we're talking about credit card transactions, because we have other systems that are going to say, you know what, this credit card can only be used once a minute. We're talking about the fraud detection stuff and those sort of things. So we don't actually have to worry about, you know, concurrent transaction for this thing too much. Maybe there are legitimate reasons. Maybe it's a corporate card that is being used by many places. A common case where we actually have a lot of concurrent transaction is the first of the month, where all of your utilities are on the credit card. All of them are going to charge you at midnight on the first of the month. That's when you have a lot of concurrent transactions. And so now it's become an issue of what sort of guarantees do we have to maintain, and is it worth my time? For example, I may want to say, you know what, I'm going to maintain only the monthly balance inside the credit card. And that is also, or maybe it's actually very, very useful for me to actually load all of the data, all of this data in one go without doing any queries. And this is my actual DDD aggregate because this is what I'm working on all the time. I'm sure, Justin, I'm sure that you had at some point in time the credit card stopped working for some reason, and then you had to call the credit card company and, oh, you're over your daily limit, or this is a suspicious activity because you're now in a different country, or we saw 2 transactions that were geographically distributed and we blocked the card, or any of those sort of things. So depending on the system, this is actually something that is very, very important. And this goes back to how you model things. And that's about what I have to say about this specific scenario. For actually doing, but let's move for a different banking scenario, and this is the account. And usually when people talk about account, people talk about, oh, I have the account, then I have transactions, and then they say, okay, you know what, this is obviously a very, very relational model. because a transaction is basically a TXID, amount, to, from, and that's about it. And this is how people like to think about that. But the truth of that is that this is a very, very simplified model of how how banks think about transactions. Because when a bank thinks about transaction, we have the following things. We have TXID, amount, to, from, and then you have fees. And you know, overdraft, line fee, currency conversion, we feel like it, other stuff like that. Then you have things like taxes. Then you have a whole bunch of other stuff that is actually related to these sort of things. Maybe you have a contract with the bank that you are exempt from fee for up to 30 transactions per month. So the first 30 transactions you have no fees. Maybe you just withdrawn some money from a saving account. This means that the government gets involved and they take some cut out of that. All sorts of stuff like that. And this is on actually per transaction basis. So a transaction is by no means as simple as just a couple of values that sit on a row somewhere. This is something much, much more complicated. And even beyond that, we usually don't think about transaction as independent items. Because in this case, this transaction is actually related to something much more interesting. This is a transfer, which this is your monthly paycheck landing in the account. And there are different rules for paycheck versus, oh, you just got some money because John just paid you for the beer you bought him last night. And in addition to that, you generally really, really don't care about transaction in isolation. You usually care about transaction on a business day level. So usually we talk about balance is so this is how I would actually model a bank account. So every day that you have some activity in the account, you would have a new document with this format of the key. And
See, as you're typing that, I'm looking at that as like a MapReduce result. But you're saying it's a document.
Yeah, it's a
so
document.
You're implying, okay.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
So you're implying that if this is a document, you're calculating the values as required on the fly and then storing them into the document, not using an index in this case.
No, because okay, that really depends on what is the major entity in your case. For example, let's say that you're talking about a stock account. Stock accounts have a lot of transactions. They're absolutely separate from one another. And it is perfectly fine to say, oh, you have to wait for the close of business day to see the absolute right amount because it keeps changing. Or you want to see the current amount? Here is what we have as of this second. And in that scenario, I would actually say that we have separate transactions and then we aggregate them using MapReduce. That is absolutely would be the case. But let's talk about residential account. So the account where your paycheck lands in tends to have, I would be very surprised if you have, more than 100, 200 transaction per month in that account. And at the same time, it is absolutely critical for you to be able to see what's going on in there at all times. So I would say at that point, this is what I want to see. I want to see all of the account at a point in time as it goes. There is also something else that we have to consider, which is that a bank has the need to do backdating of stuff. For example, let's say that you send me a check for 10 Australian dollars. And the checks come to my bank and I deposit that. And the bank says, okay, we just deposit 10 US dollars because they haven't actually looked at closely as a check into your account. The next day they realize, wait a second, this isn't US dollar, this is Australian dollars. So now they have to retroactively go back and change what happened. And they're not actually allowed to do that because they have to keep maintaining the state of the system as it was at a given point in time. So what they're actually going to do is to say, okay, on this date, on May 7th, what we're actually going to do is to enter a transaction whose date is actually May 4th. And this is absolutely legal. Okay. Again, this I can't emphasize it enough. It really, really depends on the type of scenario that you're working on. But if you need to support something like this, then you can't just use MapReduce. Well, you could, but this makes things slightly more complicated because then you have a transaction that is compensating for another transaction and all sorts of stuff like that. But this is a much clearer way of actually representing things. Because now you have, this is the date of the transaction, and the current date, this May 7th, is the effective date of when this took place. Otherwise, you have to have an effective date and a sin at date. I don't remember the name for that in English. But you get the point? So enter date,
Yeah.
that's the term. So there is effective date and there is enter date. Enter date. So that's the basic idea.
Okay. So what about the scenario then where we want to make sure that we want to take cash out of our account?
Mm-hmm.
So you go to the ATM machine.
Mm-hmm.
We could then reference this document because this document would be today's date and it would be accurate.
Exactly. That's the major benefit of doing this like this. Obviously, you could have it like this without the transactions, and the transaction would be separate, and you just every time that you update the transaction, you also update the document. But I think that this is most of the time when you need to load the account, you also need to load the transactions, but we'll leave that for now. So we have this, and then you load the transaction, you load the document, you add a new transaction and modify the balance accordingly. Now, and on, let's say that now it's May 8th, and we try, and
Yeah.
we have a new transaction for this account. We don't have an account for that. We don't have a document for that, so we go to the previous account, previous document, create a new one with the previous day balance, and then start from there with all of the operations that we do.
Okay.
Okay?
So that means if we're looking at a system, there's going to be, for one user, or one account I should say, there could be 365-ish, 4-ish
Yes.
stocks
Yes.
per account.
Per year.
Okay. Per year, yes.
Yes. And
Um,
yeah, go ahead.
and I'm just trying to think, and if someone wants to look at their, I want a report, please, and I want to see my monthly transactions,
Oh,
then
then the easiest thing for you to do is just to load all of those documents, because there are going to be a max of 30 or 31 of them.
yeah,
And
yeah, that's right.
you can very easily just do that because you know the format, and you load all of them together in one query to the server. And this is absolutely acid, because you don't have to do anything else here. Okay, you don't have a query, and you have access to all of that information.
Yep.
In fact, what's actually going to happen most times is that you won't have documents for days where you didn't have transactions. So you try to load all 31 documents, you get 5, and then you show all of those 5s to the user.
Yeah. Could you do like a date range instead of basically forcing the numbers, and then it goes, I'm only returning 5 because you've only done 5 transactions in that period.
Here you go. Okay.
Cool. Yeah. And all these documents, they're actually different to the actual account doc. This is just, as you said there, it's a daily activity.
Yeah. You
So
could
the
actually,
account doc has all this other metadata, and if you wanted to do that, you could just include the daily activity if you were doing something else with the account.
or you could do something like stuff like this.
Oh yeah. That's tricky. Cool. Okay.
The major thing to remember is that RavenDB actually have two different distinct mode of operation. One of them is the document store, which is absolutely acid, and query like start with, queries like load, go to the document store. There is no waiting, there is no such thing there that you have to deal with. This is absolutely concurrent, and all of those. This is absolutely up to the millisecond, transactional, and all of that. The only now, and then you have the indexes, which is space, and it could be stale and all those sort of things. And by doing things like this, where you actually have the ability to change where you actually determine the document ID based on some external value, such as date, you get a lot of power because you can start doing a lot of interesting things.
It's really interesting how when we were in the Jabber chat talking about what stuff like this, you've come in and you've looked at the problem totally different to how we were all looking at it. Basically, we were thinking, well, how could we get our information via an index, because that's what we were thinking initially, because it's all MapReduce, it's all going to be the aggregated results, and then we've got issues of stale or not stale, and blah, blah, blah. And I don't think any one of us looked at it like, try not to use the index or try not to use any indexing and just go straight for just docs where the doc themselves has their information in there.
Yeah, because you really don't need to. There are some things where, okay, you will, with RavenDB, you will not be able to get up to the millisecond information about how much money is there in this branch. Not unless you prepare for that ahead of time and put it in a document, which more or less defeat the point of having indexes in the first place. But this isn't actually a question that you usually need to answer with up to the millisecond precision. This is just something that you want to know at the end of business day. And we can give you that answer at the end of the business day. That's the whole beauty of that. Banking is actually an environment where we can do really, where we fit really well. Because
what about
go ahead.
What about like this is looking at a pretty not too complex a scenario. This is mums and dads, you and I. This is our bank accounts and this is our transactions. And you highlighted something before, which is like in a month we probably wouldn't hit over 200 transactions. Totally true. So when I'm thinking about looking at it from sort of an activity perspective, I'm thinking there's not much really happening. Like I use my card today, and then I might not use it for a couple more days. So there's not much. I'm not putting much pressure on a database. Times that by thousands of accounts happening. It's not too bad. But there's no reason why we can't use Raven for like supermarket franchise where they've got people on the checkouts just going bang, bang, bang all the time.
Tobias is doing that.
Oh, is he?
Tobias, can you hear us?
Yeah.
Toby?
I'm here, yes. Hi.
Hi. Sorry for just dropping you on that, but Justin's scenario was just precisely what you're doing, isn't it?
I haven't followed it the last 5 minutes.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that.
I'll recap. What I was saying was how can we use RavenDB in a supermarket franchise where there's a lot of people like literally at the same time making transactions. They're buying the food and they're putting the money into the bank account.
That's usually separated. We have separate cash registers, and each operates alone. So you then get reports at the end of the day, usually, where all the transactions are grabbed on a back office system and processed there. Any banking activity is operated on different machines. So you have those keypads where you put your card in, and this operates completely differently. So we don't have this problem with bank accounts.
So could you have a bank that is accepting like a RavenDB backend that is accepting all these transactions happening really quickly, where we're using credit to pay for it, or a card that I'll say, not using cash?
Yeah, I don't see any reason why you couldn't do that. The main reason why you would want to do that, look, the major problem for doing that is that RavenDB will throw a concurrency exception if you have two users trying to modify the same document at the same time. What you're talking about is a lot of different users trying to modify different documents at the same time. And that is absolutely allowed.
Because in this case, there'll be transactions coming in, and they're all individual. I wouldn't be holding my two cards at the same time and swiping the cash register and paying for two different amounts. So I wouldn't really be fighting with myself.
No, you wouldn't. You couldn't. You actually have a physical thing that prevents you from doing that.
One hand's lower than the other.
Yeah.
So yes, true. So the worst thing that would be happening here is like looking at the model we've got right here would be trying to see. This is what I was thinking. What we're looking at here is, I feel like, one side of the story here, and I don't have any banking experience, so this could be wrong. But looking at what you've written up there, there's a person that has an account 1234 and has done a transaction at that time and date for an amount.
Yeah.
Well, I've taken $10 US out or put 10 Australian dollars in. Doesn't that have to actually also flip side somewhere else? So, for example, if I'm in the supermarket and I say I want to buy this food and it's at $100, the supermarket actually gets my $100.
One second. Whoever said that the supermarket and you are on the same bank? So now you get into Now you get into more interesting scenarios, because what you're actually going to see, this is the case where this is actually fixing a mistake. A bank transaction usually looks something like this. And this is in this case we'll say it something like this, okay? And you have the transaction ID, there is the remote transaction ID, there is a whole bunch of stuff like that. So you wouldn't see it on your account here is, I'm sorry, I've just had to deal a lot with banks just to get paid a lot of times. So let's say that you send me a check. Here's what's actually going to happen in real life. I've deposited a check. The bank says, okay, I'm going to put the money in your account, but that money isn't actually accessible. This is imaginary money. So let's say that I'm trying to withdraw some money, and the bank is going to say, no, you don't have money. Here is the money, yes, but it's not there. And it's going to send an inquiry to your bank. Your bank is then going to deduct the money from your account and transfer that into my bank account, into the account for my bank in their system. It's actually more complicated than that, because there is an international system called SWIFT that handles international money transfer, but we leave that aside. And they have so my bank has an account at your bank, and then it transfers the money, and then the money is transferred from your bank to my bank, to not to my account, to a holding account in my bank. Only then does it get transferred to my account. Usually after someone had to look at that to make sure that we aren't actually smuggling some drug money. Okay? And
yep.
Even so, this is still extremely simplified version of what's going on.
Sure.
Yeah, which actually can get fairly interesting, because there have been a couple of times where I had money show up in my account and I had no idea why. And
so what we're seeing here is, it's not really a technology or old technology problems, meaning that now that we've got internet and we've got fast databases, let's say like Raven here, it's actually humans are actually putting blocks in place to protect things such as fraud, as well as some other. Okay, so even though we as consumers, or in this case a few of us were developers, were thinking, well, why can't we have more real-time systems? that might be fine for a very simplistic scenario. But when it comes to, let's do a real bank, it's like, well, the technology's there, but there's things in place to protect fraud and stuff, so they're not going to ever do that.
Exactly. Let's say that you try to send me, let's say you try to send to the US $10,000. That has got to be reported to the IRS. Now, for fun factor, what happens if you send me three transactions that are $9,000? Well, that might not have to be reported to the IRS, but that still means that there is going to be a flag raised somewhere. Oh, we need to watch this account. They're explicitly trying to avoid the IRS. And then you get into just general fraud, and it really gets complicated from there, and we haven't even touched on taxes. Okay, I think that Boris has a question. Boris, you're now unmuted. What was your question? Boris? Boris apparently not listening. Okay. Guys, if you have any questions, right now would be a great time to ask them. Justin, do you have additional material, questions, thoughts?
No, I'm just trying to think of some more of the conversations we had, and it keeps coming back to how you've approached the problem and you've just modeled it differently. And I think the takeaway for me, at least here, is I know it's a very complex model. Banking in itself, that's just, you can't really talk about that in half an hour now. I understand that.
Yeah.
But my real takeaway here was the first thing that you tried to do is like, let's try and make this, let's model this where we basically do a load. And even though you've got on the code here, it says starts with, you're still returning an ID, and that ID is going to be loaded. And all you're doing is just passing IDs. And I that's what I thought was really enlightening. And I was like, shit, I didn't think of just trying to model it a bit differently. Maybe I'm still stuck in relational modeling where I've been doing SQL for too long, where I think I can have one account and then I'll have transactions and I'll just include if I need to, but I'll do a map reduce on top of that to quickly cheat.
The major point that we have, the major shift in the design guidelines is that we really have to think very carefully about how we model the domain, that we can't just model that in isolation. That's one of the things that I truly despise with all of these ERD diagrams and those kind of things, because those things actually say, oh, just at the start of the project, before you know anything about the project, let's do one of the most important things and model how we're actually going to treat it for the rest of this project life. And then you're stuck with that. My approach most of the time is to say, okay, let's look at the scenarios and let's see how we can model that every interaction is a load and save of single document. Hopefully it's a single document. Some scenarios where you want to do reporting, then obviously you load more than documents than that. But by thinking about that, this makes a whole lot of sense. This allows you to do quite a lot of things very, very easily. And we have questions from Andrew. Andrew?
Hey guys, how you doing?
Very well. Yes.
Just a quick question. I'm still a bit of a newbie, just trying this out for a future project. I've come across a scenario where we're obviously trying to avoid too much denormalization. So I've got a CRM scenario where there's an actions table which might have a reference to a company name, a user it's assigned to, and a contact name. So there's multiple denormalized fields that I don't want to have to do a lot of patching to.
Why are you having
and-
denormalized fields?
Maybe this is where I've done a newbie mistake, but it's in order to be able to do searching and sorting, I need to have those
Yes.
actual text in the
But
index.
let me, okay. The problem with what you're saying is that it's accurate on the face of it, but do you actually need to do that? So you call this action, but is this actually actions? What sort of actions are we talking about?
It's in a CRM scenario, so it might be, you might need to cold call someone or send an email or set up a meeting. So there's a lot of
Okay.
sort of generic things that hang
And
off it.
here is a question. What would happen if you did okay, and now I want to search for actions for this guy, something like that. Well, why won't I do something that basically say, let's search for contact or company or user. This is basically the model that we have. 1 second. Okay. So this is basically what we have here. Okay. And you can see that we have a multi-map on cars, on people, and on units.
Yep.
We can search on any of them. Now, the important thing is that right now we're basically going to do session.query for, let's do it like this, and okay. Here's the important thing. Right now, you're going to get one of those, either a user, a company, or a contact. So what I'm actually going to do now, I'm going to do something like this. Easier to do it like this.
So you're basically set up to sort in memory, is it?
Okay, so you're actually doing that in 2 levels. Okay. You done it at 2 levels. First, you do the actual search over all of these. Then you actually show this one. Okay?
Okay, so once I've populated my shorter list, you're saying then just do quick lookups for each the names.
Think about that. You're trying to do a search over everything all at once, but this is actually has very little. How do you say that? This actually has very little value to the user. Think about that. What happens if we build something like that? This is the search, and now you try to type, John. And here you get a list of
a mixture of users and companies and contents.
And what you literally give them as a drop down. You can actually, the fun part about this, you can, instead of having this just as a single line, make this a rich view. So for the user, put the user ID, put the face. For the company, put the logo. For the contact, put the company logo, put last contact, those sort of things. And then they select the appropriate one, and then you know what to do about that.
Yeah, no, I don't have a problem with what you're proposing there, but it's probably a bit different than what I was actually what I was asking about.
Yeah.
My scenario is an action list where someone might be looking at, as a manager, 20 different salespeople, and seeing what tasks they have today. It's a grandiose long list, and that's where I need a sorting scenario that works well. And I've been able to do that, but that's been by denormalizing.
1 second. Okay, so the problem isn't with the search, the problem is with the sorting. Because...
Well, yeah. So by embedding the username into the action, I can sort on the index rather than doing anything on the client side. But now, if for whatever reason John Doe's name is changed, I need to do patch updates, or it's becoming a bit.
Yeah, so at that point you
need to it.
Yeah, so for those sort of things, let's try to do that. So here we have an example of an album, and we have the notion of a genre. And if we look at the genre, so now what I want to do is I want to sort by the description. So let's try to do something like that.
Okay.
And the way to do that is from album. And 1 second, I need to actually look at this. Okay, so I want to look at okay, I'm outputting this one, and no, and then I'm going to do another map for and now we are going to run into somewhat of a problem. What I want to do is to do a group by, to do reduce, which requires us to do a group by. But we can't actually do a group by in here because we don't have what to do group by on. See the problem? Because we can only do group by on the genre ID.
Yeah.
So that is something that we can actually not do. This means that if I want to sort on that, yes, I would need to, you're right, I would need to actually do the normalization. Yeah, the normalization is probably the easiest way.
Yep.
And the question here is, let me think about this for a second. Yeah, but the question here, how important is this for you? The ability to do sorting on related things.
I think my boss would want it.
Okay. The reason that I'm saying that is that your boss is likely to want it because this is something that he always had very easily. And
Exactly, yeah.
okay, and what happened if you just said, this is going to be somewhat more costly. I can give you sorting by users, so you will get similar user group together, but it wouldn't be based on the it wouldn't be based on their name. Then again, you can also say, you know what, I'm going to make sure that the ID is actually, then you can sort on the username, and that would actually give you good sortability. Then again, you run into the problem, how do you change that?
Well, it wouldn't be a frequent thing, but it's definitely something if I'm going to embed it, then I have to allow for the scenario where it does change.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think that if you want to do sorting by related items, the normalization is the only solution. That makes sense.
All right. Well, that's. I guess what I want to know is if there was no other way to get around sorting with the normalized.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you've answered that question. So that's good.
Okay. Do you have any additional questions?
A&A,
Yes.
can you go back to the third tab, please, with the code sample?
This one?
Yes, please.
Mhm.
Is there any reason why you're doing in the second half of that a where instead of a load?
Because now I'm doing, you're talking about line 18 and downward, right?
16, yeah. That's
16, yeah.
Yeah.
So I cannot do a loading here because I'm trying to find something like this. And I don't know what action this is. I don't know this is action number 5 or 10 or whatever. And so I'm actually, in this case, I have to search by property because I don't have that in the document ID.
But where it says if you have contacts count, you know you've got contacts, so can't you just load the contact IDs that have been returned?
Which line are you talking about?
Like, for example, line 20.
I'm not I'm loading look, I'm loading
filter.
actions
Oh, sorry.
that has contact
yep.
ID that match the contact that we loaded.
Yep.
Or
Okay,
company
sorry,
that is,
I misread it. Yep.
Yeah.
Cool. Yep.
Okay. Great. Guys, any additional questions?
Nothing springs to mind at the moment. No.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you so much for showing, and I hope that you have great time using RavenDB. And that's all.
Thanks for your time, A&A. Much appreciated.
You're absolutely welcome.
Yeah, thanks, man.
Bye.
Cool. Bye.